Okay, great. All right. Well, welcome everyone and good afternoon. Thank you again for joining us in another online format. Seems to be kind of the nature of the beast these days, but we'll give a little update later on kind of where we are with COVID and how the museum and our programs are operating. Just a little introduction to everyone myself. I am Caitlin Coughlin. I am the new executive director here at the Louisa County Historical Society. I began here in late August, and it was a whirlwind beginning. I started in August and had my second child at the end of September. So I've been out for 3 weeks and I'm now back in the office and we're kind of getting rebooted again. So I've been very fortunate to have met some of you, and I'm sure I will continue to meet you as the months and years go on. I'm a Virginia transplant, originally from Philadelphia, and I ended up here because my husband was a grad student at the University of Virginia. We are both archaeologists, and I've spent my career throughout the East Coast researching life and social inequality from the mid-1700s to the 20th century, basically. But the most substantial part of my career has been spent in Charlottesville. I was an archaeologist at Monticello working on slavery and kind of the material remains, ceramics that were seen in enslaved households. And one of the things that I loved most was developing public programs and working on museum exhibits. So I was really interested in getting back into public education and public programming and kind of community-based archaeology and history. So ultimately, my philosophy is that history doesn't mean a whole lot if we're not talking about it and we're not engaging the community with it. So I'm really looking forward to being here at the Louisa County Historical Society and bringing Louisa County history to life, which is our mission statement. So that's a little bit about me, and we can talk later in the meeting portion about that, as well as some updates to our staffing, changes that have occurred since this time last year, and our anticipated goals for 2022 and beyond. We're going to have our lecture first, and then we'll have brief remarks from David Holtzman, who is our president, as well as our board of directors vote for this year. But right now, I'm excited to, actually, I think I didn't advance that. There we go. Right now, I am very excited to introduce Dr. Jeffrey Hantman. He's our guest speaker today. He is the professor emeritus of anthropology at the University of Virginia. His field research and teaching have sought to explore and expand the application of archaeology to understand colonial life here in America and the post-colonial persistence and change for Native Americans here. Professor Hantman has been interested in kind of the intersection between history and archaeology, and he's worked with the Monacan Indian Nation on collaborative histories and kind of the repatriation and understanding of artifact collections and human remains to the Monacan Tribal Center, which is based in Amherst. He's the author of this book, which you can see here, Monacan Millennium, a collaborative archaeology and history of a Virginia Indian people. You've seen that on our flyers. We'll have time for questions for Dr. Hantman after the lecture. But if you have anything that you can think of off the bat, please feel free to post your questions in the side chat. In the event that we run out of time, I'll be able to use the chat to forward those questions on to Dr. Hantman, and we'll contact you afterwards with answers. So thank you for speaking with us, and I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Caitlin, and thank all of you for taking time out on Sunday to be part of this lecture and question and answer. It's an honor to speak to the Louisa County Historical Society, to greet Caitlin also in this position, known her for a long time, and to be able to speak generally about Monacan archaeology and history, And I know that in Louisa, Fluvanna, and around Virginia, if not the nation, a particular place, a particularly important place known as Rassawick, a Monacan town, has been very much in the news of late. And I'm not in a position to speak to any ongoing discussions right now that are taking place, but I have certainly followed the work, know the participants, and have commented freely as the counties and the James River Water Association and the Corps of Engineers solicit comment. My comments are not unbiased, and they're not secret either. But mainly today, I want to speak to give you what I called in the subheading Rassawick in a regional and historical context. It's often the case that when environmental impact studies focus on an impact area, that's the total focus. Rassawick, from my perspective and what I can contribute, and we'll try to, by wrapping up this introduction right now, is I will try to speak to Rassawick as part of a regional Monacan culture and its connection to other sites and what one might expect at Rassawick, and also Rassawick in its long-term history, because there's thousands of years of history in the site that archaeologists refer to as Rassawick, at close to Point of Forks, near the historic town of Columbia on the James in Fluvanna County. So with that said, I'm going to try to, I know you have a business meeting coming up in less than an hour. I'm going to go through my slide talk so you can see what archaeology does, what it looks like in the Piedmont of Virginia, what Rassawick might look like in part, and its significance, and also review a number of historic maps to put it in, again, the regional context that I think you will find illuminating. That said, I'm going to move on, and there's our first image. This is very basic, obviously, county by county map. I'm sitting right here right now. Maybe you can see me inside that circle in Charlottesville. And most of you are in Louisa and or Fluvanna, Goochland, Buckingham, Nelson, Amherst, and up to Orange County. This is the heart of Monacan country. At around 1607, it is the ancestral territory of the Monacans is larger than that. In this map, I just want to introduce the main characters, so to speak, in the colonial moment, and much of the debate about the significance or concern about the significance of the place of Rassawick is situated in that early colonial contact, when Rassawick is spoken about by English colonists and today spoken about by everyone connected to preservation and development and balancing the two. So to start out if you look to the east, to the right, on the east side of the fall line, which is where the rivers, of course, drop steeply, that impedes transportation back and forth by river, but it doesn't obstruct it, but it makes it difficult. Where the Rocky Falls are at Richmond, Great Falls at DC, and Richmond, the falls in Fredericksburg, and the falls all along the area. East of that was the territory of Algonquian-speaking tribes who, for some time, possibly as little as 50 years, possibly as many as several hundred, it's being studied right now, but in the time certainly of contact, of English contact and first written records from the 1580s to the 1600s, the Powhatan were organized. These are about 32 Algonquian-speaking polities, tribes, were organized in a hierarchical society under the leadership of one individual who inherited the title of Mmanitowick, the paramount chief. This was the person you know as Powhatan, and whose fame is worldwide for his agency at the time of contact, and of course also as the father of Pocahontas. Our concern today, it's important to situate the Powhatan are here in the Piedmont and crossing the mountains. The mountains do not form the same boundary that the fall line does, although there's contact certainly, and there's trade, which we'll talk about, between Monacans and Powhatans. But in this territory, that's Monacan territory, the smaller font letters are the languages spoken. That's important. Obviously, people to the east spoke Algonquin. And this is about the southern terminus of Algonquin-speaking people who extend up and down the East Coast. The Roanoke area, the Outer Banks, as many people know it today, that's the southern terminus of Algonquin people on the coast. Siouan people extend up and down the Piedmont Mountains of Virginia, and then down through North Carolina, down through Tennessee, Alabama, Arkansas, into Mississippi. And these are related people. Occaneechi, Tutelo, Saponi. These are all people related, and I will refer to collectively as Monacan. To the west in the Commonwealth, where the rivers run to the Mississippi. All these rivers run, all this settlement is rivers, the Potomac, the Rappahannock, the James. It's all running to the Chesapeake, of course. Once you cross over into Southwest Virginia, the Clinch and the Powell rivers, you see here, it is not insignificant at all. The rivers were the highways of the time. The boat travel followed the rivers. The rivers cut through the mountains. These rivers flow to the Mississippi. And this part of Virginia is an Iroquoian speaking, not Iroquois as one would hear in upstate New York, but Iroquoian related speaking people who become the Cherokee. A last group, less well known, is the group that the Monacan people tell the English about. And the Powhatan refer to them also, and they're known as the Massawomack in the colonial records. It's important to, again, the Monacan in a regional context, Algonquin, powerful chieftain to the east, Cherokees to the west, their own allies and cousins north and south, and then to the north and west, so the Massawomacks, Iroquois speakers. These are believed to be likely the ancestors, the immediate ancestors, the same people who colonists would come to, French would name as Iroquois, like the Erie tribe. And their territory extends as far west as the Great Lakes into Ontario, Canada. So this is a very powerful people as well. When the Monacan people are asked in the few direct encounters between Monacans and English in the early 1600s, and those encounters were few, what people do you know? Captain John Smith asked a Monacan held captive on the Rappahannock, who do you know? He said, well, I know the Powhatan and I know the Massawomack who invade this territory. The Powhatan people would often say the Monacans invaded the Powhatan. So it's a common reference, not a lot of evidence to support much of that, but a lot of talk about it. So that's the cultural geography at the broadest base, staying within the Commonwealth. The Chesapeake is a rich, rich area. The Potomac, Rappahannock, James are great route, and the Roanoke River further south, flowing to the where Roanoke Island is in North Carolina, are all great trade routes flowing east-west. This is probably most people looking on today will recognize what's called the John Smith map of Virginia. drafted by Smith in 1608, published in England by Oxford University Press in 1612. So this is not an obscure colonial document. This was being pored over as early as 1612. Smith's writing, one of which was called A Map of Virginia and a True Story of the People of Their Country, that was published by Oxford University Press. It was the first non-religious text that they published. Tremendous significance there. But we use this map is helpful for us to get situated. I've put a red line around the territory that John Smith had no problem saying, here's where the Monacans live. He used the name Manahoacs for the people in the Rappahannock, but the contemporaries of that time all say the Manahoac and the Monacans are the same group. The one lives in one river system, the other in the other. But as the Pamunkey and the Mattaponies had different names, but were part of a Powhatan chiefdom, the Monacans and the Manahoacs were united, and all their cultural behaviors, as seen archaeologically and historically, show them to be the same people. That John Smith should put two different names up has unfortunately led to, when the written word is given such priority over the oral history or the words of indigenous people themselves, it leads to thinking there are separate groups in the Piedmont, whereas the coastal plain was united as one people under Powhatan. No, they really had a similar organization. The John Smith map, in the manner of the 17th century, faces, you're looking west. Here's the Chesapeake. Here's the James. And it's flowing, it's flowing downstream, but it's going west. John Smith had no problem saying, here's Powha-A, you kind of lose track of it, T-A-N. This is Powhatan territory. It's dense with writing because John Smith freely traveled about Powhatan territory and recorded 200 villages. Tremendously important to me, and I think to all of us, fact is that John Smith would not travel, nor Christopher Newport, or any of the Virginia authorities, the colonial authorities, governors, did not enter into the Piedmont in any serious way. And so all the information that is on this oft published, oft seen, entitled John Smith Map of Virginia, I call this the John Smith and Amarolic Map of Virginia, because what we know of Monacan site locations, both in the James and the Rappahannock, comes from a Monacan man named Amarolic. John Smith tells us that he's very, at this point in his life, he's an honest man. He exaggerated terribly by 1624, but in 1608 he was giving a straight report of what he saw and what he was told. I've blown up the section, and I won't spend this much time on future maps, but just to set us here, this is the James River. In 1608, it was known as the Powhatan Flue, Powhatan River. John Smith, again, being frank, puts these crosses on the map. They have a particular meaning, and he gives us the name of 5 Monacan towns in the James. But he tells us there are diverse others. That doesn't mean there's many different types of Monacan towns. Open the Oxford English Dictionary. What did the divers mean in 1608 and 1612? There are diverse others. Diverse means so many I can't even count them. That's not what the dictionary says. That's my translation. Many, too many to count. There are diverse others. So the Monacan territory looks rather sparsely settled, even though there are large towns, when compared to the density of ink you see in the Powhatan country. And that's because Smith, Newport, and others would not travel into the Piedmont without the guide, without assistance from the Powhatans. And guess what? The Powhatans were not willing to show the Monacans to the English. And the Monacans were not ecstatic, to say the least, to know the English had arrived on the coast. And so they avoided contact with the English. Now, that was a very smart strategy in terms of survival of the Monacan culture well into the 1700s in the James. What it brought them was obscurity in the historical record, and that's what we're still overcoming. English texts do not talk enough about the Monacans. When you try, there is information, and that's what I've tried to do over the last decade and more, is to see how often Monacans are talked about, and then how archaeology contributes to what we know of the Monacans. I've taken the Smith and Amarolic map, and put it on a familiar geography map for you. Here's the James River. This is the town of Rasselwick. Next to where you see red triangles, those are modern day towns, and I included Columbia there. Scottsville, here's Charlottesville, Fredericksburg, Richmond, Lynchburg, and the Monacan people today live just right about here. So this is Monacan territory, not for all time, but around the advent of English, Spanish, French colonialism. This is where we see the houses, the towns recorded. I will show you other maps based on archaeology that show how much Monacan people live west of the mountains as well. Here's Smith's guide to his map. The cross this is on the map in the upper right-hand corner. I've cut and pasted it here. To the crosses has been discovered. What's beyond is by relation, an honest admission. He might have said is by relation from my Monacan captive at the time, Amarolic. These longhouses, take note because we're going to be talking about them. John Smith says these are king's houses. The term king was used by the English to say there's an equivalence here between the power of the chiefs. There's some equivalence between the power of native chiefs in chiefly towns to who we call kings in Europe. Rasselwick has a longhouse. It's a king's house. Note the Old English S here. So that's a king's house. Messinicac was a king's house. Montezuma, which is just about 2 miles from where I'm sitting right now, it's Charlottesville, 1608. Although he placed it on the map just a little bit above on the Rivanna, has a king's house, and Monahassinaw has a king's house, just west of Scottsville on the James. I can't show you Rasselwick archaeologically because it's never been studied. It's being tested right now. It's, as you probably know, it's being assessed because there were tentative plans, maybe continuing to construct in and around the area, or probably around the area of Rasselwick. We'll talk about it, but the sites that have been excavated that are king's houses are Monahassinaw and Montezuma. So I will show you what University of Virginia excavations over the years have told us about these places. First, and I'm going to run through this so we have questions. Everyone in Fluvanna and Louisa, if you walk the fields along the rivers, streams, if you walk plowed fields, if you walk in the woods, you may come across these. I just want to point out, these are commonly called arrowheads. Very few of them ever sat at the tip of an arrow. They are stone tools. 80% of them that are found, the large ones, are spear points or knives. They were hafted to bone or antler shafts. They were the original Vegematic. They chopped, they diced. They disarticulated a large deer. They served many purposes. But in this period, around 1000 BC and on up to the 1700s, you get larger and then increasingly smaller triangular points, which were both spear points when they were this large, and then strictly arrow points. So these artifacts, if you find them, all archaeologists, preservationists, historians would urge you to leave them in place, even on the surface. Where they were dropped, they can sit for thousands of years and not be moved. Maybe a plow will move them 5 feet this way, and the next season they'll move them 5 feet back the other way. So leave them in place, because these are the calendars. And so the ancestors who lived, of the people who lived at Raswick, extend back 12,000 years and more. But this chart that shows the known protectile points, if you find one that looks like this, it's 8,000 BC. If you find one that looks like this, it's 2000 BC. And there's a lot of these. They're called Savannah River points in the south. They're called Susquehanna points in the north. The tensions always exist. They're identical. But the triangles will take our attention. 3/4 grooved axes. You pick them up, they have soft edges, they're large, they're heavy. Put them back. Again, if you pick them up, we urge you to put them back. These were axes. They were hafted also to bone, antler, wood, shafts. And when they were used, not after they've sat in flood deposited soils and moved around by the plow in sandy soils, they've been softened on the edge. These things could take, these axes, not tomahawks, an unfortunate appellation, but these axes could take down a young tree in no time. And that's how houses were built and fires were made, in a very, very careful way of processing. Now, these are going to date to the Archaic period. A pipe made out of clay. Native people were growing tobacco. They had native tobacco and they domesticated it, and tobacco is for millennia an important part of Indian ceremony, sacred ceremony, and it's evidenced in the pipe. Pottery. Here's a whole pot, often marked with fabric or net impression when the clay was wet before it was fired. And so you see this kind of decoration. It is a decoration on the base of the pot, and then incised decorations on the rim of the pot. Very few of them survive whole, but these pot sherds are everywhere. Now, the importance of this, so many times as Raswick was in the news and continues to be in the news, people would say, how do you know this is Raswick? You walk along the James, you walk along the Rivanna, you walk along the Hardware, the Slate Rivers, the Rappahannock, the Rapidan. These things are everywhere. Well, no, they're in a lot of places, but when they occur by the thousands per square yard or square meter, then you're in a village site, you're in a town site. So these potsherds may be common. You may have picked some up. Here's the cord impression. Here's the fabric impression. Here's incised impression, different kinds of tempering material added to the clay. These are important, and walking the rivers tells us where the chiefs' towns were. There are hamlets everywhere. There are smaller towns. The density of the stone tools and the pottery is a major clue. Now, radiocarbon dating and other kinds of technical soils analysis will confirm that, but this is the primary evidence. Here's Raswick. Raswick is the Point of Forks. It's where the Rivanna meets the James. And it is not the easternmost town. There are two other Monacan towns here, and here are Messinicac and Malhemcho. But this was the one where the major rivers joined. And that's a significant point in terms of a culture that lives by the river, that trades by the river, that travels by the river, that builds temples in the river, that casts ritual items into the river. And Rassawek is where the two major rivers of the James and Rivanna come together. And it is, we are told by English colonists, we are told by Amarolek, it is the chief habitation of the Monacans. And it is the place to which the other nations pay tribute. That is, Amarolek didn't have a lot to say, but to describe his people, that's what he said. That's the initial documented importance of Rassawek. As early as Rassawek has been known, certainly by Monacan people, by indigenous people forever, for centuries, millennia. But in the 1920s and 1930s, the Smithsonian Institution took an interest in the James and Rappahannock and Potomac River valleys, in part because they could load up their Model Ts and Jeep-like cars, and when they weren't in South America or the American Southwest Pueblo region, they being so close, the Washington-based Smithsonian archaeologists came down and walked the James, did archaeological survey along the James, along the Rivanna, and the Rappahannock and the Rapidan, and reported on it. So this is a map drawn by world-famous historic archaeologist David Bushnell from the Smithsonian, and he had no trouble. There were no political issues. There were no development issues. This was a relatively undeveloped part of Virginia, of course. He had no problem saying, when I get here, I see a density of artifacts that date to the 16th century, 17th century. This must be Monahassinaw. This must be Montezuma. And when he got to the Point of Forks, this must be Rassawek. And we have no reason to doubt that. John Smith's naming of identifying of places on his map has been verified by William Mary's surveys over the years. Smith's map and its reproduction have been pretty accurate, and it's borne out by the type, the date, and the density of artifacts. That's what we see. That's why when you look at Rassawek and say, if anyone looks at Rassawek and say, how do you know this was Rassawek? Well, as has happened recently, survey 5 miles upriver in both directions, and the density falls off. When it rises up there at Point of Forks and adjacent, Elk Island and places like that, there's a reason for that. This is Monahassinaw, and I'm going to go quickly here. This is the site up on the James in Nelson County that we excavated. What you see barely, because we didn't have drones quite yet, we could have climbed a ladder. We actually did climb a ladder to take this one. But you see evidence of post holes. That's a house. These small dark stains go in a oval to circular fashion. Storage pits, trash pits, hearths. Look how shallow it is. Understanding the geomorphology, the geology along the James is critical, and that's been a large part of trying to understand Rassawek. Here, first of all, how rich the Piedmont floodplain low ground is. Look at that corn, and those fields were there in the same soils 500 years ago, 400 years ago. So that's what we found in here in Nelson County, right up next to the surface. Pen and ink drawings then show, when we put it all down on graph paper, we saw that we actually had about a quarter of the village, maybe less than a quarter. More of it is out there. We don't want to excavate all of it. We want to save lots of it for the next generation and new technologies. but we identified 5 houses: post holes, storage pit, post holes, storage pit, post holes, storage pit, outdoor storage pit, which is interesting, whether the storage is kept hidden within a house or whether it's shared. You see Monacans had their storage pits outside the homes. So it was stored to keep it dry. It was stored to store a surplus of seed corn that neighbors could share in, and possibly as a surplus to pay tribute to the cheapest town at Rassawek. The excavations we've done in the lower right, that's a reconstructed Monacan house with exterior features. This is where post holes would show up archaeologically. And then National Geographic, after William and Mary and the Department of Historic Resources and a consortium of Native American tribes worked collectively to excavate Chief Powhatan's home base. So a king's house and village at Werowocomoco. And while we couldn't say Rassawek would look exactly like this, they're different cultures, but they share a lot. So the king's houses are the long houses back here, and the commoners, if there was a great division, lived in these houses here. That's kind of a model for Rassawek, but a question is whether Rassawek would look the same. Big boats ready to go into the Chesapeake and into the James. This is University of Virginia excavations at a very sensitive site, Montezuma, which you saw earlier. And this is very sensitive because, as all king's houses, Montezuma being a chief's house or king's house, it's associated with human remains, with burials. And the Monacans buried their dead in the Rivanna, in the Rappahannock, in large burial mounds. Jefferson excavated one of those mounds with a crew of enslaved laborers, no doubt, because they did quite a bit of trenching. The town associated with that was planned to be developed, since it's flat land. It was planned to be developed as soccer fields. The soccer organization, the Board of Supervisors, the Monacan people themselves, and the university collaborated to say, let's figure out how we can preserve this site and build soccer fields. To the extent anyone thinks archaeology is inherently and inevitably impossible to work with and around to preserve these sacred sites, I think the work at Montezuma near Charlottesville is testimony that it's not. But we had to go very deep. Here, the floods didn't carry soil away as they did at the other site I showed you. Given the local geology and soil sediments, this is all the last few hundred years of flood deposits. Flooding is destructive, but those flood deposits also buried 17th century Montezuma. And little by little, we opened it up to the point where we could look down, again, climbing a ladder or on top of a truck, possibly, before drones. And you see the same thing, storage pits and post holes. And this dark level right here, that was the living surface in 1608. And it's the living surface in 1608 and 1508 and 1208 and 2000 BC that a deep deposit such as is known at Point of Forks at Rassawek, that's the evidence. It's not ambiguous. These are sterile sediments that are clearly flood deposited, and there's a science of geoarchaeology that documents that. And here, it's full of charcoal. It's full of bone, animal remains that were tossed into trash pits. They turned the soil dark. The former posts that created the houses turned the soil dark. It's a science, but it's not mysterious. It's very, I would say, empirical. With radiocarbon dating, we can put a date on this place. And we did. And it was late 1600s, early 1700s. That's why when Jefferson visited and decided to desecrate or excavate, depending on your leanings on that question, and he did both, when he dug into a Monacan mound, he said this mound is located across the river from an Indian town. He wasn't looking at houses. He recognized that the remnants of a town recently abandoned were still there. I talked about projectile points, arrowheads, and what happens over time, they become arrowheads. And as you go through time, this is time, the very small triangles become the tool of choice and a weapon, both for hunting and possibly in war. These are from Montezuma. They are 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter, 1.5 centimeter by 1.5 centimeter. That's the size that Monacan people were making arrow points in the 1600s and 1700s. We find them at Montezuma, made of local quartz, and then occasionally trade items like this dark chert that comes in from the Blue Ridge. So it's compelling that Montezuma, Monahassana, and Raswick, as identified in the 1600 maps, can be located and are located archaeologically. The pottery as well, I could say much more, but this pottery, the identical designs are found in Indian pottery that is found in Jamestown, obviously then post-1607. So we find this is from Montezuma in Charlottesville. Very important trade items come out of the Piedmont in Monacan territory. Soapstone, anyone living in Nelson, Albemarle in the Piedmont and up to Washington, D.C. along the fall line knows that steatite or soapstone is a rare mineral that can be shaped into sculpture, as many sculptors do today, and in the past was made into bowls that could contain fire. Now, they weren't used for cooking. They were used to hold fire, most likely burning fish oil, and used for ritual purposes because they are traded from the Piedmont of Virginia into Powhatan territory and as far south as Georgia and as far north as Pennsylvania. Here's an Algonquian man wearing copper. I can't test that copper because it only shows up in the watercolors John White drew, but other copper from the area is either European trade goods, copper that has tin and zinc in it, that comes from Europe. The English knew that Indians valued copper. How did they value copper? Well, there is a native copper in the Blue Ridge Mountains and in the Appalachians generally, as well as in the Great Lakes. And the Monacan people, if you map the location of their burial mounds, which I've done here, extending past where John Smith ever saw, these mounds were still standing in the 19th and 20th century. If you map their location in the Piedmont, from the Rappahannock River to the Rivanna, down to Roanoke River, Leesville, over to Lewis, this is Stanton, this is Rockbridge County, practically to the West Virginia line. This is Monacan country, and the seas are where the copper deposits were and still are. They were industrially mined in the 19th century. They're not unknown. And this line of dots is the richest area of soapstone deposits. So these resources were mined by the Monacans and traded to the Powhatans. And actually the Monacans were in the, if you think from a trade perspective, before European goods started pouring in, the people in the center, the mound builders, the people who control, there's no copper, there's no soapstone in the coastal plain. And yet those items were valued. The chiefs traded for them. And they were controlled by the people of the interior. Now, the Monacans did not disappear. I could show you much evidence of that. They may have relocated away from colonial settlement. They certainly did. Some moved north into Pennsylvania and eventually into southern Canada, joining with the Tuscarora people. Some moved south and joined with the Catawba, but many moved into the foothills of the Blue Ridge and moved to where they live today, outside in Amherst County and in the hills surrounding Lynchburg. There was safety in those locations. So there is a highway sign that marks the place we mentioned earlier called Malhemcho. It was a Monacan king's house. And around 1700, Monacan people still lived there, but by this time, the power had shifted to the colonial government, and the Monacans were displaced to make way for French Huguenots, who then settled the cleared fields that the Monacans had lived in for centuries, if not millennia. And that's a sad story. But I mention it because the French Huguenots recorded. I mean, the notes of the Virginia colony say, we're going to clear this space. We want the Huguenots there, even as a buffer against the Indians. And then the Huguenots note how often they were visited by Monacan people to trade. So the term disappearance is used casually in Virginia history, and we need to lose it. Nothing mystical happened here. These people were displaced or chose to move away from the colony. And Rolek, who shared information about the indigenous settlements, was asked by John Smith, why do you treat us with hostility? Why do you treat us? Why do you ignore us? And Amarolek said very clearly, and Smith wrote it down, we heard you were people who came from under the world, not a good place, who came from under the world to take our world from us. And that, in fact, was the case. So in 1700, Malhemcho, Monacan town, is noted clearly. In 1755, in Thomas Jefferson's own hand, in his book, Notes on the State of Virginia, he describes indigenous people, Monacan people, traveling through the woods to visit the very mound that he had dug a trench into. In his own hand, in this copy in the UVA Special Collections, in his always conflicted way, although he dismisses Indians as savages in his language in the Declaration of Independence, here in Greek, he writes, these mounds, these burial traditions of the Monacans are much like the Greeks. And that's a way of saying I respect this society and the monuments they built. 1755, he observes people coming through Charlottesville to visit that mound, and he writes that down. The Monacan people, I'm wrapping up here. The Monacan people were acknowledged, received tribal recognition by the state of Virginia in 1989, and that was a step along the way to overcoming the eugenics policies of the 20th century that blanketly, with unmasked racism, declared no Indian people to exist in the state of Virginia. And they literally erased that name on documents, the name Monacan, the name Indian. The Monacan people since the 1980s have fought to be recognized by the state and the federal government. And in 2018, with the efforts of the tribal leaders and the backup of the archaeological data and the historical data and testimony from all kinds of people, received recognition as one of the 500 and almost about 580 today federally recognized tribes in the United States. That's quite an acknowledgement, and they more than deserve that recognition. The information gained from archaeology, not an ironic twist, but a nice circle The results of the dig at Montezuma were discussed by Karen Wood, a Monacan leader, a well-published and noted poet, and Danny Red Elk Gear joined me in Thomas Jefferson's Rotunda to speak publicly about, along with Chief Kenneth Branham, who is, again, chief of the tribe, to speak about their people. Jefferson had written their obituary. He said they won't survive this century in the 1700s, and he was wrong. And here they are. And just a few months ago, a Monacan leader, Vicky Ferguson, is shown in the lower picture, educating, if you will, or discussing with Governor Northam the significance of the sites along the James and all the Piedmont, including Rassaway. So it's taken me a little too long, but if you give me time, I can answer questions. Do I have time to take a question or two? Caitlin?
Sorry, I was unmuting myself now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we absolutely have time to take questions. And having never worked in this format before, okay, we have some questions showing up in the chat here. Our first one is from Jack, and he was interested in a discussion about women as chiefs for the Monacan.
I apologize, first of all, to all of you that I can't, to get through the lecture and answer the chat questions. We would be here till 7 o'clock tonight. I'm willing to stay. Anyway, women as chiefs, absolutely. Well documented, and in the past, Iroquois women, powerful. Indigenous women were in symbolic and real terms the owners of the land, and they were the agriculturalists, they were the farmers. Europeans were appalled at this. Look, they make their women do all the work. What's wrong with these people? But the women had power, and that's going back centuries. Women today, Ann Richardson is the current chief of the Rappahannock tribe. Sharon Bryant was a great chief of the Monacan people that pushed me quite a bit, and I appreciate she's passed away. She's gone now, but yes, and there's Vicky. The people leading today are a mix of young men and women. Diane Shields has been an important leader of the Monacan people. The elected chiefs are men and women both, to answer your question, in the past and the present. Yes.
All right. So our next question, Jeff, can you actually see these questions?
Yes, if
Okay.
I might be missing one.
That's right. No, I've marked them all so far. So our next question, is in your book you describe an epiphanic moment in which the Monacan community members gently corrected your understanding of how they see the rivers. Can you talk a little bit more about this and how this conversation gave you insight into how they see the earth? And then off of that, what are Monacan spiritual ritual practices like, and what role does the environment play in their practices and religious beliefs, and how would they describe their ancestors' religious beliefs?
Okay, that's a lot, and some of that I would ask. Caitlin and I have talked, and there are now, with federal recognition comes the ability for Monacan people to work full-time for the museum. And some of those questions I try not to speak for Monacans. I'll tell you what I know. But soon, perhaps the Historical Society can host Teresa Pollock and Lou Branham and others who can share what they want. A lot of ritual practice is not for everybody. Now, the epiphany, I love the term. I don't think I use that term, but maybe I will in the future. Thank you. I when we dug at Monacan that we knew was associated with the burial mound that had Jefferson estimated 1,000 people. We've been able to evaluate that, and it's accurate. 1,000 people, and that's one of the three small the mound that was studied in Orange County that was being destroyed by flooding. So we excavated and then reinterred the bones on Monacan ground today. There were 2,500 people in that mound. These are people who had a sense of place of great permanence in the town, but the region was the home. And 2,500 people in a mound, 1,000 people. So the epiphany came, and it was polite, but it transformed me for sure. When the Monacans held a blessing ceremony at Montesupinol, as a way of saying we're about to disturb the earth to learn something, and we asked permission of the ancestors. That was long before there were no politics. This was not to make a point. This is what they do, and they knew the place. And they invited, the media came out, the television cameras were on, the newspapers were there, the magazines were there. So they were talking to Monacan people, and they were talking to me. And I couldn't say often enough, we're going to stay on this side of the river where the town was, and we're not going to go on that side of the river where the mound was, because we've got our ethics and we understand, and the mound is sacred. We're going to be over here in the domestic space. And I just carried on with that. Nobody said anything and made the point. Afterwards, when the cameras were turned off and the reporters went away, I'll give credit to Danny. Danny Gear came up and said to me, "This is the moment." Danny said to me, "Jeff, that was pretty good. You did good. But what's all this stuff about this side of the river and that side of the river? You know, it's you Europeans that build dams and allow the rivers to downcut so deep that you see rivers as boundaries. You use rivers to mark the boundary between Nelson County and Albemarle County. You use rivers to put warehouses and build your town somewhere else. You're not thinking. You're applying your own Eurocentric common sense, which isn't sense, doesn't make much sense." He said to me, "The river, Jeff, is the heart of the village." That's the sentence that Toby is referring to. Thank you, Toby, if you're still with us. The river is the heart of the village. It joined the mound, the ancestors, with the living. It wasn't a boundary. So in real terms, in property ownership today, what I was saying made sense. We're going to stay over here. We're not going to go anywhere near where human remains might be disturbed. And that's been a constant discussion at Rasselwick. But in terms of emphasizing that as a boundary, it was an academic's perspective and not an indigenous perspective. From that day on, I listened. I had teachers. My Monacan friends were my teachers. Danny, Karen, Diane, Chief Branham, Teresa, Lou, the next generation, Phyllis Hicks. They didn't talk to outsiders very much, but as we became, as they accepted me as someone contributing and having the best interests of the tribe and archaeology in mind, we quietly discussed a lot of the biases that archaeologists before the protocol and ethic of working collaboratively with indigenous people was adopted. And I'm pleased to say the book I wrote is a collaborative, I talk a lot. There was that moment, but then there were a lot of other points. I started asking, instead of me asking the questions, I want to know when did the English first arrive? I want to know who traded what. And Monacan people were saying, that's not what we want to know. And so I really am uncomfortable in a short span going into detail. It's not what I do, but there is no question. Monacan people were missionized in the 19th century by Episcopal missionaries, and that actually saved the tribe. But they did not, and all across tribes in the East and the West, missionaries came in when governments denied their very presence, and they were in great poverty. So Christianity certainly has played a part, but the indigenous ritual beliefs did not disappear. I wouldn't say it's a syncretic religion. I think people are able to do both. Respect the ancestors. The very bones of the ancestors are sacred, and the ideas of the ancestors have come down to the 21st century, and we make a big mistake if we don't listen. So that's as specific practices. Some are common, sweat lodges, things like that. But the power of the earth, things that minerals like the soapstone and the copper, things that come from the earth. Like you can make a wooden prayer stick, and you might think, well, that's a sacred ritual object. And indigenous people, in my experience, will say, well, it's made of wood. Yes, it's sacred, but they're meant to decay, and then we make new ones. But copper, soapstone, cocoon, various minerals that can't be produced, they have particular significance. And the Monacan people know where those resources are. They always have, and they're part of the power of their people and the power of the chiefs. Gifts were made into the river. They would get copper from Europeans and cast it into the river near temples as a gift to the gods. And they would also keep tribute payments above ground. So I'll leave it there because I know I'm cutting into your meeting time. But if there's anything else I can try and answer in one word, I'd be happy to. But Caitlin, I thank you and everyone who's still here for listening. We can.
Yeah, so I will, what I'll do is I'm going to compile the remaining questions that we have, because I do think some of them are great. Well, I mean, they're all great, but particularly some of them pique my interest as well. So I'll compile those, and I have everyone's contact information, so I can get you guys answers as we move forward. And that way we can kind of continue this conversation and give you some other resources that might help. And that's one thing, I have Dr. Hantman's contact information, and I know many of you have interests in this. So you're welcome to find me at the Historical Society. My email is on the website, but also it's director@Louisa History. I'm going to write it here. So it is in the chat. So if you have any additional questions that you think of after the fact, please feel free to email me and I can pass them along. But thank you, Jeff, very much. This has been very informative, and I, as always, love hearing about the Monacan in Virginia. I
can say this much, since I know there's interest in Rasselwick, I don't speak to officially, but work is ongoing, seeking alternatives. I think our work at Montezuma may be a good model. Compromises can be found, and the Monacans have worked very hard to find a way for plans in Louisa and Fluvanna to go forward. And if I said any more beyond that, I shouldn't speak for the agencies and the work that's ongoing. But I think there's going to be a positive resolution. I hope so. Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'll sign off. Sign me up for a membership. I'm in.
All right.
Okay.
I know where to find you.
Yes. Okay, well, thank you very what I don't know is how to sign off, but I'll figure that out while you go on with it.
Yeah, I think if you click on by the microphones, that leave stage button, you should be good to go. Okay, all. Now you get the membership meeting portion of the event. So that was wonderful. And yes, so I have been very fortunate when I came on board. I was very lucky to have this already in place, and was lucky enough that I knew Dr. Hantman from our time in Charlottesville. My husband worked very closely with him for his PhD. So it was actually great for me, two worlds intersecting in a new one. So I am enjoying it. So I don't know if David can figure out how to get on so he can talk or not. Oh, there he is. Okay. So we're going to have some brief remarks from David, and then I will give kind of a rundown of what has been going on this year and what you can expect for next year after our vote. I'll let you take it away, David.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, briefly, I just want to say a few comments about the two individuals who will be leaving the board at the end of 2021. And then after that, I will just make a few comments about the three folks that are on the ballot for the next 3 years. First of all, I want to talk about Gloria Gilmore. As she expressed it to me, Gloria loves working in the trenches, uncovering or bringing forward African-American stories and community contributions. She's also worked hard as a board member to bring the African-American community into the museum to document their history. She's done this in part through two important initiatives: the Family Search Workshops, held twice a month at the museum from 2016 to 2019, and Will the Stones Whisper Their Names, a project to locate and map African-American and other cemeteries in Louisa County and surrounding areas. Gloria and two friends she met through the Family Search Workshop now lead a nonprofit called One Shared Story to build on the work they started at the Society. Thank you so much to Gloria for her many contributions to the Historical Society. And I also want to talk about Jim Marstall. Jim has served at least a decade on the board, including a term as chairman, during which he has been actively involved in many pursuits. These include indulging his passion for the history of the town of Mineral and its fascinating mining years. He has been our point person on taking care of our buildings and grounds and took on the task of documenting our artifacts. Jim has also volunteered for several years to lead our fundraising committee and has taken the lead on a number of important efforts in that area. We will deeply miss Jim as he relocates to another part of the country to be closer to family. And now I want to talk a little bit about our three candidates for the board. First of all, Deb Field. As she told me, I have always loved historical objects and stories. Deb is a longtime supporter and active participant in the Louisa County Historical Society activities, notably with the Herb Guild, and is a planner for the annual Heritage Day Festival. She's a native Virginian from Hopewell, and she joined the Hopewell Historical Society in high school and recorded oral history accounts on a tape cassette recorder to talk to older residents of Hopewell about their history. She's also volunteered with many other historical organizations wherever she's gone over the years, including with St. Louis, Missouri Historical Society, raising grant funds to help save the historical Beacon Theater in Hopewell, at the Truman Annex in Key West, Florida. And she also raised grant funds to help people with low income stay in their homes in the gentrifying Oregon Hill neighborhood in Richmond. As she puts it, she loves helping out with her skills and volunteer and public service work. Second, Vernon Fleming. Vernon is a retired procurement professional with various private companies. He served our country in the US Army from the 70s through the 90s. He's the past president of the Shady Grove Rosenwald School Incorporated in Gum Spring here in Louisa. He's a graduate of Louisa County High School in 1970. He was one of the 13 African-American students to implement racial integration at the high school as part of the Freedom of Choice program in the late 60s. He became a member of the Society's new African-American History Committee this year, and as a member led the effort to place a historical sign in front of the high school, remembering the racial integration of that school that I just mentioned. And that sign, by the way, has been approved by the school board and board of supervisors and is anticipated to be installed this winter. He actually joined the board already as an appointment by the board to fill one of our open positions. And in his short time on the board, he's already stepped up to chair our fundraising committee. And last, Matt Kersey. Matt is a longtime U.S. Postal Service employee, including many years as postmaster right here in the town of Louisa. He served on many local public bodies, including the Louisa County Board of Supervisors, Louisa County Health Center Commission, Louisa Town Council, the Town Planning Commission, Economic Development Authority, and Louisa Downtown Development Corporation. He was also involved with the Hanover County Branch Association for the Preservation of Virginia Antiquities. But most notably, one might say, he has long been involved with the Historical Society, including as our board's vice president from 1998 to 2000 and as president from 2000 to 2002. So there is your introduction, and I'll turn it back over to Caitlin for the last part of the meeting.
All right, Paul. So I'll just let, it seems like most of you have voted already, but I'll just kind of let it go until the end of the meeting. So far, it seems like everyone's figuring it out. So if you have any questions, just let me know. All right. So this is going to be a little bit of maybe a different experience than last year. Carlene had left the position in June, so I have a good idea of what happened after June, and only some understanding of kind of the progress that was made in the beginning portion of the year. You know, this has yet again been one heck of a year in the world and for Louisa County Historical Society. At the beginning portion of the year, pandemic conditions, as they were last year at this time, were still in place. And as a result, many of our programs were in the beginning of the year were either canceled or modified to an online format. So it meant that a lot of the things that you all look forward to every year were not happening as they normally do, which just is life these days, I guess. But, you know, in the latter half of the year, we've been able to get the museum up and running and have started back on some of our volunteer programs. We've been able to have a few in-person events this year, and are looking forward to, you know, 2022 and hoping that as we kind of get up and running with the changes in staff that have taken place, that we'll be able to kind of bring us back to a little bit more normalcy in 2022. So obviously I started for the Historical Society in August, and I've been getting my feet under me. I think it's been a whirlwind adventure for myself, getting to know all of the various arms here of the Historical Society, but I really have been very thankful to all of you, both board members, volunteers, other individuals who are, you know, involved in, you know, day-to-day activities that have really helped me understand all of the different aspects of the Historical Society. And I'm really thankful and looking forward to working with you all more as we kind of get these programs back up and running and develop more programs. So just a little brief update on some of the things that have taken place. We were able to hold the annual ice cream social in September. That was the first program that I came in on. And we hosted it in partnership with the Shady Grove Rosenwald School. We had an amazing turnout. Over 65 people were able to come. As you can see, we've had some socially distanced tents. And great speakers. I know everyone really enjoyed seeing the newly restored building, as well as learning about life and education in the school from former students themselves. It was a really great introduction for me to both our membership, as well as kind of the opportunities that we have here at the Historical Society for research and collaboration. Okay, next. In September, we saw a lot of change as well. September, we were able to participate in, oh, this is October, sorry, moving on. In October, we were able to participate in the Louisa Fall Harvest Festival. It was a great opportunity for us to get out and talk to people directly. We really were fortunate to have members of our African American history program. We have Latika Lee was present and Marilyn Campbell, Vernon, David Holtzman, Breeze, Jim Marstall, and Crystal were all there to assist. And I really appreciate it because I had had a baby 2 days before this. So it was nice to know that the program was in everyone else's hands and I could rest easy. But it was a great opportunity to promote our African American history program. We were able to talk to people directly about how the program goes about collecting oral histories and to promote that, as well as showcase, you can see here one of the earlier renditions of what is now going to be the Freedom of Choice roadside marker. Vernon Fleming was there to discuss progress that has been made on that project under the Freedom of Choice project. That we've been able to meet with the county supervisors as well as the school board, and we have been given the green light as well as some generous donations to have this marker made, fabricated, and we are slated to install this marker, which recognizes the first students to integrate at Louisa High School prior to state mandated and county mandated integration in 1965. Prior to that, or in that earlier year versus the 68-69 school years. So we're going to install that once it's fabricated, and the plan is that we're going to do that in February, and that will coincide with other programs that we have on the docket for Black History Month in February. We'll have some guest speakers like we did last year, and hopefully a community meeting. And that is ongoing work that we are always looking for new participants and donations towards getting this work, whether it be monetary or time-wise, out into the community. September also saw the hiring of our new volunteer and program coordinator. His name is Ethan Starr. He has been a wonderful addition to the staff, and I have very much enjoyed having him around to help me. He comes to us from the University of Virginia. He is a master's student in architectural history and has an extensive background working in museums and volunteer programs, as well as archives and digitization while he was a college student at Boston College, and from his hometown in Kansas City. Sorry about that. He is already off to the races, looking to reboot our volunteer program. He is continuing to boost our social media presence. So please, if you haven't already, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, and YouTube. Links to that are on the main page for the Historical Society. Ethan is getting ready to meet you all. He and I, in conjunction, will be hosting a virtual volunteer information session. The plan is that we're going to do one of these on Tuesday, November 16th at 10 o'clock in the morning. We are hoping that if it is successful, we'll probably run another one maybe later in the afternoon to catch other individuals. And that it'll be an opportunity for people to come on, kind of open house style, ask us questions, see how you can get involved if you're interested in that. We have many different opportunities, whether it be helping out in the research room, being a docent in the main museum, working out with our archives, or even, other specialty programs, we're always open to ideas and suggestions. But Ethan is a great resource, and he will be the person to contact for all of your volunteer needs. But we will be posting links as well as invitations to this via email and social media. So as we get closer to the 18th, 16th, we will get those out to you all, so that if you're interested, or if you know anyone else who might be interested in volunteering, please feel free to forward on the contact information. In October, we also hired 2 additional staff members who are our interns under the archive digitization program. You can see here in this picture that we have finally, with all of your generous donations and grant support, we've gotten the archive digitization program off the ground. We now have 2 interns, Margie Garr and Emma Tainter, who just joined us at the end of October, and they are off starting to capture images. So the goal for this will be to go through and capture digital images of all of our collections. We have prioritized those that are ones we use regularly, or are ones that are in a current state of disrepair, and we will be targeting those first. But the goal is that all of these digital images will be uploaded to our collections website, which is currently still finishing up construction, and that it will be accessible to the public as well as to us, so that we don't have to constantly be going back and forth to look at the physical documents themselves. So that is where we were. We've been lucky in October. We were also able to start hosting our hearth cooking workshops again, which have been on hiatus for the better part of 2 years now. I want to especially thank Maria Greco for her help and support in that. There you go, Ethan has commented. Maria has been great resource for myself in how these programs work and getting them back off the ground. She is essential to that program and making sure everything works and runs. And she is a testament to the fact that our October workshop had, it was a full house. We had 6 participants. Everyone had great fun, and good food was had by all. And we have lots of interest in our upcoming workshops as well. And we'll talk about those in a little bit. And so, as we look towards 2022 and beyond, we've set a pretty aggressive agenda. And you'll see here, this is a preview of our 2 flyers, front and back flyer, that will be going out in your annual membership letter as part of our annual campaign fund campaign. This is kind of what we hope to accomplish in the next year. And so obviously we're not going to be able to accomplish all of it in 2022, but we're planning to set the stage so that all of these goals will be ongoing over the next few years. So the first thing that we're really looking forward to doing is diversifying both our research as well as how we present stories and the heritage of our community. And this is going to be a continued focus on the African American History program, which has been piloted but is now getting off the ground. And this is a program that in our first year we've been able to see where there have been things that we need to adjust, things that we were really good at, and kind of figure out what the next year looks like. We're also looking forward to, as Dr. Hantman said, I am looking forward to developing a relationship with the Monacan. We have, if you don't know, November is Indigenous Peoples Month. So it is, we were hoping to have some of the tribal members participate in the event today. However, they don't have a lot of time because they're booked solid for November. So we are going to plan to meet in December and see how we can kind of build a partnership with the Monacan so that they can help us inform how we're doing history as well as maybe revamping the museum exhibits. But all of that is to say that any of these partnerships with the Monacan or African American residents in the community is going to require significant support from our membership as well as the outside community. The African American History Program has been primarily grant funded over the last year. And while that is still our goal, and we are continuing to pursue grants as we go through, I want to make a special plug here that, this is a very important part of Louisa's history. It is something that I believe strongly in, and I know our board members believe strongly in. And I really want to make sure that we are working towards making this a permanent part of the Louisa County Historical Society's daily operations, as well as kind of our budget and our financial goals for the year. That being said, we have many of you who have already generously donated both time and money towards the African American History Program. But as you kind of go through 2022, keep in mind that this is something that we are always going to need help with, and that you can make special donations to it that are targeted just towards this program to help fund programming, help produce flyers, help collect oral histories. So it would be greatly appreciated if you're interested in donating and you're interested in donating to a specific program. This is a great one that we do take specific donations for. And I'll talk a little bit about this again, but I'm going to put our support page, which you can find from the main museum, the main Historical Society website, but it shows all the opportunities that you have to support the Historical Society, whether it be from our annual fund campaign to individual program donations. So just keep that in mind as you go forward, and look for our programming in February for Black History Month, because this is one of the ways that we're going to continue to develop and present the diverse stories and history of Louisa County. Goal number 2 is to develop and implement a plan to take our museum quote on the road. And this is going to be the continuation of our archive digitization program. We've got this up and running, but we've developed a comprehensive plan to make these more accessible to the public via a website, which is currently under construction with our outside contractors. This is going to be an incredibly great asset for family researchers and historians, local educators, community members, students in Louisa County, which will allow them to kind of see what we have in the museum and use it without the constraints of a time scale, visitation requirements. They're not going to have to call up the museum and say, hey, can I come in and see this document? They'll be able to access it from California, Florida, the Louisa County High School Library, all of those different places. So it's going to make things more accessible. And this will be, right now, we're doing our documents, but the goal is that we can implement our audiovisual recordings as well as artifacts. All of these things can be made accessible. This is another program that we have been very fortunate to have had a lot of support from the community and from the Historical Society membership. And, we have a great resource in all of you for this program. We're always looking to continue that support, whether it be getting involved in the actual archive process. We have some volunteers who do that, or whether it be through donations to the program. We have had, a record number of donations from membership, but this has been kind of the getting up off the ground phase. And we are in the process of figuring out how this is going to be an ongoing component of the Historical Society. As you can imagine, with as many collections as we do, we're not digitizing them all this year. So we are going to look forward to kind of what the next year, 2 years, 5 years looks like for the archive digitization program, because it's not going to happen overnight. So support as we move forward is always welcome. We're also hoping to expand our scope of our research department. The research department is currently undergoing a reorganization of the library to make it more accessible to researchers when they come in. I know that myself, when I showed up, it was a little hard to figure out where things were and the system. So I know that that's something that our research volunteer staff is currently working on. We're also looking to add additional digital collections for public viewing. From those, we have some of our records digitized in Excel format so that people can research those, but figuring out how to integrate our archive digitization program products, what's been developed and put on the website, how those are going to be most useful to the research center. And then the other thing we'd like to do long term is hire a research manager to oversee and facilitate research. We weekly receive anywhere from 2 to 5 requests for research, whether it be someone coming in the museum to do research on their own, but we also have a large number of people who contact us via phone or the website to ask questions about their family histories, historic buildings. So we're looking to have someone to basically be a research coordinator for all of that, so that there's a point person and they are the expert in what our resources are and how to get those back to the public. And then finally, we hope to redesign and modernize our museum exhibits. They've pretty much been the same since the Historical Society moved to the museum from the jail. And we're looking to kind of revamp them and tell a little more nuanced history of Louisa County. And this is one of the things that I'm really interested in doing as an archaeologist. I think we have some other really great pieces in our collection, and I think we have a great resource in kind of how we can present that to the public. And that's one of the things that I'd really like to do over the next 5 years. That's not happening anytime soon, because that's going to take a large investment of time and money to do. So that's kind of our goal for the next year. As you know, every year we try and show what we're doing and how much both time and money that takes to run the Historical Society. As you can see, we've updated, for anyone who has been paying attention, the amount that it costs to operate the museum every day. The Historical Society in past years was operating at a lower budget. Where now you can see it takes us about $320 every day to do what we do. And that is important because we have really changed how we conduct the Historical Society. We've branched out. There have been more programs added, more family events, more long-term research goals for the museum. So this is kind of we're growing the Historical Society. We're reaching out further into the community, and unfortunately that's going to take a little bit more money. So when you do think about making a donation to the Historical Society, really think about what you'd like your investment to be, whether it be towards our general operating fund as part of our annual campaign, kind of this $320 operations cost to keep the museum up and running for a day. We have donations that you can make towards the Elaine Taylor Fund, which are specifically towards our volunteer and program coordinators' budget and scope and how we kind of reach into the community. And then our specialty programs, which are the African American History program, as well as the Archive Digitization program. And, you know, those are just the beginnings of what we're doing here at the Historical Society. So that is my little brief update on what's been going on, what is going, the plan is for going on in the coming year. And just so that you all are aware, I am also copying this into the chat. It is our calendar of events. We have 2 upcoming events in the next 2 months that you might be interested in, or you might know someone who's interested in. We're going to be hosting another hearth cooking workshop on November 13th at 10 a.m. That is a Saturday. It is a High on the Hog feast, which will be highlighting the pork as a product here in the fall, whether it be salted pork, curing pork, those sorts of different techniques that were used in the colonial period. And then that is a sign up register event. The link can be found on the calendar. It is sign up through the Louisa County Parks and Recreation Department. We have a holiday open house that will take place on December 4th. And that will be on a Saturday right after the Louisa Christmas Parade. So we will have kind of an open house of people to come through the museum, as well as interactive events outside, so that we can kind of all have a healthy and safe holiday festivities. We'll have some outdoor refreshments, hot apple cider, cookies that we will have cooked in the hearth. And we'll have some costume interpreters and kind of just general Christmas festivities, so that everyone can come and see each other in a safe space and get into that Christmas spirit after the parade. We also have some other events that are kind of always ongoing. The Herb Guild is still meeting. We are hoping to be able to do some masked indoor events for the Herb Guild as the winter now comes upon us. They've been out working out in the yard while it's been nice and warm, but that obviously is about to change. Hearth cooking workshops will continue, and we're hoping to have some other events for kids, like a craft activity at the Christmas open house, and we might be able to do some more of those as the winter months, whether it be a take-home event or in person. So those are kind of what's going on over the next couple months. I look forward to meeting all of you. Please call me, make yourself known. I really have been fortunate to get to know many of you already, and you've been great assets for me as I've gotten settled. So I'm looking forward to working with you all and being a liaison and representative for your organization over the next year to 2 years and onward, So I think that's about it that we have for me as we go forward. And we will keep an eye out for your annual membership letter and fund that will be going out in the mail this week. So it should be hitting your mailboxes shortly. Does anyone have any specific questions or things they'd like to ask? All right, well, that looks like a no. And I just want to say that our nominations have gone through. So congratulations to Deb and Vernon and Matt, as you have been approved towards the board of directors. Overwhelming support for everyone. Oh, there we go. I got beat Reese to the punch. So yeah, that's about it for me. I will let